All day on May 31st, word spread that a young white woman had been victimized by a black man. At 3 p.m., in the afternoon edition of the Tulsa Tribune newspaper, an openly racist paper at the time that referred to Greenwood as, quote, Nigger Town, the flames were fanned by a hastily printed, instigative front-page article titled, Nab Negro for Attacking Girl in Elevator. Even though there was no evidence, the article stated that Rowland attacked her, scratched her hands and face, and tearing her clothes. Once the Tribune hit the streets, reaction amongst the whites was unanimous. According to Ross T. Warner, a manager at the Tulsa Machine and Tool Company, the talk of lynching spread like prairie fire. Rowland was held at the Tulsa County Courthouse. Just as the sun was setting at about 7:30, a crowd of hundreds gathered there, demanding that Rowland be released. The mob wanted Rowland to be freed so they could lynch him. Fortunately for Dick Rowland, Tulsa had just elected a new sheriff, Willard M. McCullough. McCullough was determined to maintain order at the courthouse and placed armed deputies around the building. Word of a mad mob gathering to lynch Rowland quickly spread to Greenwood as well. Blacks were determined not to stand idly by. Many of them had just returned home from World War I and were ready to help defend Rowland from a rope.
They said they will not lynch on our watch. We will not have it.
At 9 o'clock, 25 of the men armed themselves with shotguns and rifles and marched to the courthouse to offer their support to authorities. But their offer was turned down, and they left. Within 30 minutes, the crowd outside the courthouse continued to gather and by now had doubled to 2,000. At 10 o'clock, a second wave of 75 black men went back to the courthouse to offer help once again. But this time, they were confronted by the growing mob who had been drinking heavily for hours. Shots rang out, and when the smoke had cleared, 12 men lay dead. Outgunned and severely outmanned, the blacks fled back to Greenwood, pursued by members of the mob. Dr. George H. Miller heard the gunshots outside his office, and he ran to find a bleeding black man and said this.
I went over to see if I could help him as a doctor, but the crowd was gathering around him and wouldn't even let the driver of the ambulance, which just arrived, pick him up. The crowd was getting more and more belligerent. The Negro had been shot so many times in his chest, and men from the onlookers were slashing him with knives.
The situation grew worse by the minute. By midnight, about 500 men and boys from the mob were sworn in as special deputies at police headquarters and given badges. One of the new deputies, Laurel G. Buck, stated that police officers told the new recruits to get a gun and get a nigger.